Single dad's blind date turns to shocking love when he meets college girl at 3 a.m. The clock struck 3, its echo bouncing off the empty streets like an ominous whisper. Jake sat alone at the dimly lit diner, fingers tapping nervously on the formica table, each pulse mirroring the anxious thrum in his chest. This was supposed to be just a casual date, but the stars had conspired to make it something much weirder. He glanced at the door, every creak signaling the arrival of someone or something more bizarre than he could have imagined. Just minutes before, he had captured a glimpse of her through a rain-streaked window. She stood there, drenched in the halo of a flickering streetlight, her silhouette eerily beautiful. Jake wiped his sweaty palms on his jeans. College girl. A decade younger than him. How had he let his buddy set him up with someone fresh out of the classroom? But then, desperation had its ways of leading a man astray. Suddenly, the bell above the door jingled. A gust of wind swept in with a rush, carrying a waft of something sweet and intoxicating. Was that Jasmine? Out stepped the girl he'd been waiting for. She was magnetic, with bright red hair cascading down her back, but her eyes held a spark of mischief that made Jake's heart race in dread and excitement. A lump formed in his throat. What was she doing here at this hour? He forced a smile, but something flickered in her gaze, a spark of recognition. She hesitated, biting her lip as she scanned the room. The diner was noticeably different now. The pale lighting felt sinister, shadows shifting like dark spirits waiting to emerge. Something was off. "Jake?" she asked, her voice slight and uncertain. "Yeah," he stammered, barely able to swallow. "You must be, Jess?" She nodded, brushing her hair behind her ear, and he saw a glimmer of something dark beneath her brightness. This wasn't just a blind date. It felt like an unraveling mystery, each second layered with unspoken words. Just then, an old man in the corner noticed them, his gaze penetrating as if he recognized the tension hanging thick in the air. He whispered something to the waitress, who nodded, her eyes wide, reflecting curiosity and concern. It hit him, what was it about this girl that felt so familiar? The hairs on the back of his neck prickled. What did she know that he didn't? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jake's heart raced as Jess leaned in closer, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't think I'd ever see you again. Her words ignited a firework of questions in his mind. Who was she? What connection did they share? The brief spark their eyes caught felt like a thunderclap. Before he could respond, a loud crash erupted from the kitchen, and the lights flickered. Everyone froze, even Jess, her eyes wide and searching. What was that? She asked, her voice shaking. He barely had a chance to formulate an answer when the room fell silent. The old man and waitress exchanged looks, their previously warm expressions now morphed into apprehension. Jake felt a cold sweat break on his brow. Was he in over his head? In that moment, he realized this was more than just a blind date. It felt like stepping into the eye of a storm, and he had no idea what was brewing. As the tension built, Jake knew he was on the brink of uncovering something extraordinary or horrifying. But how did Jess fit into this puzzle? And what secrets were lurking in the shadows of that diner? All he could think was, whatever it was, he was about to find out. The silence was deafening, and Jake could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. It was like they were all holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. He looked at Jess, her wide eyes reflecting both curiosity and fear. Her earlier spark of mischief had flashed out, replaced by something darker, as though she had just realized the gravity of their situation. Just then, another crash echoed from the kitchen, louder this time, and the lights flickered again, sending shadows dancing across the room. The waitress flinched, her hand gripping the order pad like it was a lifeline. The old man in the corner shot a glance back toward the kitchen, his face pale, as if he'd seen a ghost. What's going on back there? Jake asked, trying to sound casual, but his voice trembled like a leaf in a storm. A moment later, an unmistakable figure emerged from the kitchen. It was the cook, wild eyes and an apron smeared with grease. You all better get out, he barked, his voice fraying with panic. Something's not right, it's not just the food. Jess grabbed Jake's wrist, squeezing tightly, her breath quickening. We can't just leave. We need to know what's happening, she urged, the determination in her eyes igniting a spark of bravery in him too. Are you crazy? Jake shot back, fear rampant in his chest. What could possibly be so dangerous? But deep down, he felt the thrill of danger pulsing through him. They were right at the precipice of something monumental, and he was terrified and exhilarated all at once. Struggling to push past the rising tide of uncertainty, he stood, pulling Jess with him. They cautiously moved toward the kitchen entrance, each step echoing against the tiled floor. The ambience shifted, thick with foreboding. As they reached the threshold, the cook pushed past them, fear etched deep into his features. It's got to be stopped, he shouted, barreling past, leaving Jake and Jess frozen in confusion. What does he mean? Jake whispered, searching Jess's face for answers, but all he got was a look of shared bewilderment. Then, a sudden crash reverberated from the darkened corner behind the kitchen door, a sickening sound that resonated with threat. A rush of wind blew through, carrying with it an unfamiliar, foul smell. Jess's body tensed beside him, her nails digging into his wrist, and the panic was palpable. They turned back, only to see the old man now staring directly down the corridor, mouth agape. You're not supposed to be here, he rasped, but there was something about his delivery and urgency wrapped in layers of dread that sent a chill straight through Jake. Who are you? What's going on? Jake retaliated, looking between the old man and the retreating cook. Every instinct screamed at him to leave, but curiosity had chained his feet. Jess's eyes flickered back to him. Did you hear that? We have to find out what's going on. I need to know, she pressed, her voice a melodic counterpoint to the fear rising within him. Reluctantly, Jake nodded, feeling the unbreakable connection growing between them, laced with fear and intrigue. Together, they stepped unabashedly into the twilight of uncertainty, walking toward the half-open door where shadows lurked like secrets waiting to spill. The moment felt fragile, like glass on the verge of shattering. As they crossed the threshold, an eerie whisper floated through the dimly lit corridor. You shouldn't have come. With each passing second, Jake felt the walls closing in. He couldn't shake the feeling that everything was changing, everything hinged on this fateful decision. What would they uncover? As they ventured deeper into the looming darkness, their fates entwined in this stormy night, something stirred just beyond their reach, compelling them to push forward. What awaited them down that shadowy hallway? As they crossed into the corridor, the damp air thickened around them, almost alive with expectation. Shivers raced down Jake's spine, and the hairs on his neck stood on end. He wished he could turn back, he wished he could shout for help. But Jess's gaze anchored him, and he stepped deeper into the shadows. Footsteps resounded from somewhere ahead, rhythmic and urgent. The whispers grew louder, swirling in a chaotic symphony of fear and confusion. Faces of past customers, now mere echoes, swirled in his mind. Were they just figments of his imagination, or had they seen the horrors that lay ahead? Do you feel that? Jess's voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the darkness, electrifying the air around them. Yeah, Jake managed, his throat tight. It's like something's watching us. In the dim light, they could see an old restraining door at the end of the hallway. It was half open, creaking slightly as though beckoning them forward. With each passing second, he could feel dread creeping into his chest, squeezing like a vice. And yet, the pull of curiosity was magnetic. A metallic clang echoed from behind that door, forcing them to take a hesitant step closer. In impulsive agreement, they exchanged a quick glance, bracing themselves for whatever lay inside. Jake felt his heart hammering. Did courage override fear, or was this reckless abandon? They reached the door, its surface splintered and grimy. Jess pushed it open just enough for them to squeeze through, a sliver of light cutting across the dim room beyond. As they entered, The odor was immediate, a fierce, rancid stench that made Jake gag. The small space looked like a makeshift storage room, metal racks crammed with forgotten supplies, dust hanging thick in the stale air. But there was something else, something deeper, lurking in the shadows, and then they saw him. A man sat on the floor, huddled in a corner, hands covering his face. The tattered clothing clung to him, and he trembled slightly. "You shouldn't be here," he mumbled, the words muffled by sheer panic. "You need to leave now." "Why?" Jake felt frustration boil within him. "What's going on? Just tell us." "It's coming." The man's voice was hoarse, the tone a raw mixture of terror and despair. I couldn't stop it, it's already too late." Jess's grip on Jake's wrist tightened, ready to flee, but Jake was entranced, curiosity battling with fear. Too late for what? Suddenly, the sounds around them shifted. The faint crashes in the distance morphed into a deafening crescendo, like a train barreling toward them, accompanied by a guttural growl that made the ground tremble beneath their feet. "What is that?" Jess gasped, pulling Jake back toward the exit, but he stood frozen in place. The shadows seemed to twist and shift, creating forms that darted just out of sight. With sheer desperation, the man looked them in the eyes. "You have to be ready. It's not just food. It's what's come through with it." Just as Jake began to process the words, the lights flickered ominously and a deep shadow slithered across the wall. The atmosphere charged with apprehension, thick as smoke, and they both turned as one, facing the encroaching dark. "We need to go," Jess urged, but it was already too late. The shadow exploded outward, and a scream ripped from Jake's throat as the light disappeared entirely, leaving only impenetrable darkness. Jake and Jess stumbled backward, breaths quickening, hearts racing. They were cornered now, trapped between their roiling fears and an unfathomable unknown. With a cold, wet tendril slapping on his leg, he felt a surge of adrenaline. What had they awakened? Would they be able to escape, or was it the end of their story? Just then, a flash illuminated the corridor, revealing a glimpse of something monstrous looming behind them. What would they face in the dark? The darkness closed in around them, suffocating and oppressive. Each breath felt like a struggle. The air was thick with dread. Jake blinked, trying to focus, but his mind raced with the chaos of their situation. The cold tendril pulling at his ankle felt alive, and a sensation of terror clawed at his insides. "Jess!" he shouted, his voice echoing back at him, mocking and empty. In response, a sudden weight pressed against his chest, sending him stumbling sideways. He hit the cold floor hard, gasping for breath while panic surged through him. "Jake!" Jess's voice broke through the fog of fear. He caught her silhouette, a dim figure lost in the shadowy expanse, reaching for him. The flickering light had dimmed, but in that moment, her desperate eyes flickered fire. "We have to move!" The shadows roared, shrieking with hunger, and Jake's heart pounded against his ribcage. They needed to escape this nightmare. He surged to his feet, adrenaline pumping as he took Jess's hand, pulling her toward the half-open door. "Stick close!" he yelled, feeling the heat of their fear ignite strength within him. They inched forward, leaving the fetid air of the storage room behind, but as soon as they attempted to cross the threshold, the shadows shifted with a will of their own. Something surged out from the black, a wisp of darkness that coiled like smoke around their legs, almost urging them back. "No!" Jake screamed against the pull. The man's warning echoed in his mind, "It's already too late." But they couldn't stop. They had to fight against the tide of darkness that clawed at them, wrapping around their ankles like chains. With every ounce of will, Jake tugged Jess forward, their feet sliding awkwardly on the slick ground. Then the shadow before them swelled, morphing into grotesque shapes, twisted and serrated, as if the very darkness had sprung to life. The air grew colder, then hotter, the sweeping shadows breathing an urgent, primal hunger. "Let go!" Jess shouted, pulling her hand away. Panic coursed through her eyes. "It's dragging us back." The cold tendril around Jake's leg tightened as he turned, searching desperately for an escape, but the corridor had morphed into a labyrinth of shadows. "We can't give in!" Jake shouted back, finding strength he didn't know he had. Keep moving! Jessica nodded, fire igniting in her eyes once more. They sprang forward, pushing against the invisible barrier that threatened to claim them. Each step felt charged with electricity, a battle between light and dark, hope and obliteration. A flash of silver in the dark caught Jake's eye. Was that a reflection? With a sudden burst of determination, he lunged toward it, pulling Jess after him. The shadows writhed angrily, snapping like hungry jaws, but they pressed on, hearts pounding as they propelled themselves toward the flickering light. Then, as they reached the end of the hall, light washed over them, and they were thrown back by a force like a tidal wave, landing hard against the cold floor. They had crossed some threshold, but into what? Jake squinted against the brightness, the world around him spinning. When his vision cleared, he felt an icy grip on his heart. They were faced with an entrance, shimmering with a bright iridescence, but something watched them from the shadows. What now? Whispered Jess, her voice trembling as they both stared ahead, knowing they could either step into the light or confront the dark once more. In that moment, Jake felt something deep in his gut. They had unleashed something far worse than they had imagined. A low growl echoed from the depths of the darkness behind them, and dread pooled in his stomach. Whatever it is, it wants us, he breathed, as the world spun beneath them. The air crackled with static, and behind them, the shadows swelled and pulsed like a living entity, hungry and relentless. Could they leave the darkness behind, or would it pull them back into its suffocating embrace? Time hung in the balance. Would they choose light or spiral into despair? A breathless silence enveloped them as they lingered in that blinding light, an uneasy truce between dark and bright. Jake could feel the chill of the shadows slither back as if they sensed something far more potent looming in the glowing doorway. His skin prickled, a primal instinct urging him to push forward. Jake, Jess's voice trembled, pulling his focus like a thread of silk. What if we don't know what's waiting for us on the other side? He looked over at her, her face a canvas painted with fear and determination. She was so scared yet standing beside him, resolute. He didn't have the answers, but he felt heavy with something, a determination as fierce as the encroaching darkness. Jess, we can't stay here, he insisted, voice urgent. We've fought our way this far. We can't let fear decide for us. With that, he stepped closer to the iridescent threshold, heart hammering against his ribs. Each flickering pulse of light against his skin almost felt like a heartbeat, and he could have sworn it hummed with promise. Jess hesitated for a moment, glancing back at the shadows, which swirled like a storm gathering strength. Okay, she murmured, gathering her resolve. Together, right? Together, he repeated, his hand clasping hers tight. They stepped forward, crossing the threshold as the light engulfed them, a wave of warmth washing over him. Heat wrapped around them, dispelling the chill that had seeped into their bones. Jake's breath hitched as he took in their surroundings. They found themselves on the edge of a vast field bathed in moonlight. The grass shimmered like silver, blowing gently in a breeze that felt sweet and life-giving. Glowing flowers dotted the landscape, pulsating with a soft rhythm that resonated deep within his chest. Where are we? Jess whispered, awestruck. I don't know, Jake replied, taking a few cautious steps forward, still connected to her, but it feels safe. Yet, as they ventured deeper, the peaceful facade cracked. With every step, a sense of being watched crawled over him, an unsettling déjà vu as shadows drifted along the edges of the field, curling away like ghosts barely visible. Do you feel that? Jess asked, her voice barely above a whisper as she shivered. Yeah. It's. The air felt heavy with expectation. They both halted when they caught movement amongst the tall grass. Something stirred softly, something large and ominous nestled just out of view. A low growl echoed again, deeper and resonant, blending into the whispers of the tall grass. Jake's heart raced. The shadow they had escaped was inching closer, morphing into something tangible and terrifying. Run! He shouted, instinct kicking in as adrenaline surged through him. Jess clutched his hand tightly, and they sprinted through the field, the pulsating light of the flowers trailing behind them, flickering as if they too sensed doom. But Jake and Jess were fast, skidding to avoid the encroaching darkness that clawed toward them with greedy hands. The shadows snapped like ravenous jaws, but the moonlight-driven energy propelled them forward. They burst into a clearing, panting and desperate. But what greeted them was unsettling. A massive, intricately designed gate stood before them. Its surface shimmered but was marred with dark scratches, as though something had tried to claw its way out. "What is that?" Jess gasped. Jake stepped closer, inner turmoil battling between curiosity and fear. A symbol flickered on the gate, something he couldn't fully decipher, but it felt familiar, like a fragment of a long-forgotten memory before suddenly it began to glow. Then, the growl erupted behind them, more furious than before. They turned to see a monstrous figure emerging from the darkness, its eyes gleaming hunger. "Move!" Jake pulled Jess by the arm as they darted toward the gate. The shadows surged behind them, a dark wave creeping as they reached for the shimmering barrier. Would they escape through the gate, or was something even worse waiting for them on the other side? The night stretched on, and time slipped as choice loomed ahead. The moment had come. The gate pulsed with a fierce energy as Jake and Jess stumbled towards it, the growl behind them shaking the ground beneath their feet. A flicker of doubt crept into Jake's mind. What if they raced toward their doom? The vibrant light of the gate contrasted starkly with the shrouded menace chasing them, a beacon of hope amidst despair. "Now or never!" Jess shouted, her voice raw with urgency. They reached the gate, Jake's heart thundering as he reached for the surface, shaking with anticipation. "On 3!" he yelled. 1, 2, 3. Together, they pushed against the shimmering barrier. The world around them seemed to hold its breath as the gate responded, the symbol flashing brighter before it split open violently. A rush of energy enveloped them, pulling him into a dizzying vortex. They tumbled through, the gate slamming shut behind them with an earth-shaking thud. The sudden quiet felt jarring after their desperate flight. Crumpled on the ground, Jake gasped for air, feeling Jess's hands slip from his grip. He opened his eyes to a landscape unlike any he had seen. They lay on coarse sand, the warmth of the sun drenching them as they squeezed their eyes shut against the brightness. It took a moment to adjust, but when they finally looked around, dread washed over him. They were on a beach, massively expansive, with dark waves crashing violently against the shore, so turbulent it felt as if they were alive, angry, and demanding. "What just happened?" Jess breathed, disbelief coloring her voice. "Where are we?" Jake scanned the horizon, searching for any signs of familiarity. Their surroundings spiraled into chaos, the sky swirling with ominous gray clouds. "I don't know," but a loud roar sliced through the air, sending shivers down his spine. Panic flared in his chest as a massive shadow loomed against the light, towering over them like a mountain. Heart racing, Jake turned to Jess, whose eyes were wide, reflecting rising waves of fright. "Stay behind me," he whispered, instincts kicking in. The creature let out a bone-chilling bellow that echoed across the beach, stirring the sand. It was like nothing he'd ever seen, a nightmare made flesh, glistening with dark scales and eyes full of ferocity. The waves crashed higher as it barreled toward them, the shoreline bending in agony under the pressure. "We need to move!" he shouted, adrenaline coursing through him again. They staggered to their feet, stumbling backward as the fearsome beast edged closer. They had no escape except toward the swirling sea. "Jake!" "The water!" Jess cried out, her voice a mix of anxiety and resolve. He turned to see the dark, turbulent surf beckoning them, like a monstrous mouth ready to swallow them whole. "Are you crazy?" he exclaimed, feeling the weight of their situation pressing down like a stone. "We can't!" But Jess had already taken a step toward the waves, an urgency igniting her eyes. "We have to face it. We can't let it trap us." Caught in the moment, Jake weighed the desperation on both sides. Stay to face a monstrous creature or jump into the unknown depths? A sharp cry echoed as the beast lunged forward, its claws just inches from Jess. "Now! Go!" he yelled, grabbing her wrist as they sprinted towards the water, the beast hot on their heels. With a leap into the frothy waves, adrenaline chased the fear from Jake's mind. Water engulfed them as they plunged deeper, dragging them away from the howling shadows above. The current pulled them with brutal force, but in that chaos, they felt an eerie calm wash over them. A flicker of light shimmered beneath the surface, beckoning them. Was it safety or another trap? Would they confront whatever awaited them in the deep or drown in this swirling madness? With a final gasp, they plunged toward the light. The chill of the water tightened around Jake as he and Jess sank deeper. He could feel the weight of the darkness pressing in, nearly suffocating. The frantic flurry of bubbles escaped his mouth, mixing with the tides of uncertainty. He gripped Jess's hand tighter. The pulsing shimmer beneath them pulled him in, wrapping around him like a passionate embrace. Was this the safety they sought or a deceptive lure leading them to oblivion? For a moment, he hesitated. Then, he remembered the growl that had driven them into the waves. It spurred him on, propelling them toward the light. The glow intensified, illuminating strange shapes swirling in the depths. As they drew closer, Jake could see the soft glimmers revealing coral gardens swaying gracefully in the undercurrent. Fish darted past, their vibrant colors stark against the muted shadows. It was surreal, almost beautiful, but danger loomed. "Jake! Look!" Jess's voice vibrated through the water, or maybe it was just his mind echoing with urgency. He turned, following her gaze. What he saw sent chills running down his spine, tendrils of shadow creeping toward them from above, a dark silhouette that far transcended the beast they had fled. "I think we should go back," Jess screamed, panic bubbling in her voice as the shadows stretched reachingly toward them like fingers grasping for prey. "No!" A surge of determination coursed through him, and he pulled her toward the light as they pushed against the cold. "This way. We can't go back." But in an instant, the light flickered, dimming ever so slightly. Was their hope fading? Panic clawed at his chest. They had risked everything to escape, and now, even the shimmer was slipping away. He glanced back, and the massive creature's form erupted from the waves above, snapping its jaws like a tidal wave crashing down. "Swim!" he shouted, propelling them both deeper into the glow. In that moment, he felt his body straining against the current. Jess clung to him, her breath escaping in frantic bursts. They swam fiercely, their limbs kicking with fear, pushing against the instinct to surface. Closer, and then suddenly, the light bursting brightly before them engulfed them completely. A place beyond the physical and ethereal realm, shimmering and pulsating with energy. They emerged into an intricate world, tinged with otherworldly colors. The surroundings shifted and flowed, creating landscapes of radiant light that mirrored their desires and fears. As they gasped in astonishment, Jake felt a strange stirring inside him. Was this what he had always wanted? But he blinked hard, forcing himself to remember. "We need to keep moving," he urged Jess, their connection grounding him amidst the swirling chaos. "We need to find a way out before that thing." A low rumbling filled the air, vibrating through the shimmering expanse. The light began to tremble as if responding to some unseen force. "It's coming!" Jess shrieked, the color draining from her face. The world around them shifted violently, buildings formed from light crumbling as the creature's shadow loomed closer and darker. "Run!" Jake grabbed Jess's hand again, sprinting through the cascade of swirling lights. What lay ahead remained a mystery, just as terrifying as the shadows chasing them. They arrived at a bizarre archway, glittering with energy. Would it lead them back to safety or further into peril? "Go!" He propelled Jess forward, his heart hammering wildly in sync with the painful knowledge that could save them or seal their doom. As they stepped through, the world distorted once more. Were they too late, or was this a chance for salvation? The darkness behind them roared in fury, but the swirling energy wrapping around them seemed to pulse with possibility. And then everything stopped. An eerie silence enveloped them, and Jake felt the air grow heavy with anticipation as they emerged into another stark reality. What awaited them in this new dimension? Jake and Jess stumbled through the archway, gasping as they landed on solid ground. It felt different, at once familiar yet utterly alien. Instead of water, gritty sand gripped their feet. The brightness that flooded their visions slowly faded to reveal a landscape littered with twisted remains of what looked like ancient ruins, towering above them. But this was no ordinary place. The constant ebb and flow of color pulsed in and out of existence, as if the realm itself breathed. Where are we? Jess asked, her voice trembling with confusion. She wrapped her arms around herself as if doing so could ward off the uncertainty. I don't know. Jake breathed in the strange air, tasting salt, metallic notes, and something sweet that curled at the edges of his consciousness. He scanned the horizon, searching for signs of life or at least some sense of direction. A resounding crack echoed around them, like thunder without the storm. The ground shuddered beneath their feet, throwing them off balance. Jess grabbed his arm, eyes wide with fear. Jake, look! She pointed toward a massive structure off to the left, partially illuminated by a fluorescent glow emanating from within. Maybe we should check it out, Jake said, his instincts propelling him toward the imposing edifice. Each step felt anchored in uncertainty, but the promise of answers drove him forward. As they drew closer, Jake began to notice faint whispers weaving through the air, intermingling with the strange sounds of the environment. Was it the wind? Or voices? Clenching his jaw, he focused solely on the building, desperate to find anything that could explain their predicament. The entrance was an archway, similar to the one they had passed through earlier, but this one pulsed with an intensity that sent chills down his spine. Just as they approached, a figure leaped into view from the shadows. It was tall and cloaked, the fabric shifting with an iridescent glow. Jake instinctively positioned himself in front of Jess, heart racing. Do you seek the heart of this realm? The figure demanded, its voice a melodic whisper that seemed to resonate from the depths of their minds. Who are you? Jake challenged, struggling to keep his voice steady despite the rising tension. I am a guardian, it replied. And you stand at a crossroads. Your choices determine whether you will find your desire, or your doom. Desire? Jess spoke, apprehension quaking in her voice. What are you talking about? It lies beneath the surface of your souls, the guardian continued, stepping closer. The figure's face remained obscured, but Jake could feel its piercing gaze. To move forward, you must confront your deepest fears. Only then can you survive the challenges ahead. A shudder ran down Jake's spine. Fears? He was already haunted by the growls and shadows. Didn't he think he could stand to face more? What if we refuse? Jess asked, her eyes darting between Jake and the enigmatic figure. Then you will remain here, forever wandering this desolate space, the guardian warned, voice tinged with gravity. Jake drew a sharp breath, the weight of their reality crashing over him. Could they face what lay ahead? The shadows still lurked, and the massive creature was not far behind. But did they have the strength to confront their fears? Before he could make sense of it all, the ground trembled again, more violently this time. The air thickened, and the whispers grew louder, almost pleading. You must decide. Will you tread into the depths of your soul? Jess clutched his hand tightly, her pulse racing. Jake, I don't know if I can. The moment felt suspended in time, the world swirling around them, echoing with uncertainty. What awaited them in their own hearts, and could they face it together? The earth groaned again, and the primal roar of the creature returned, closer than before. The shadows thickened at the edge of the light, beckoning them to make a choice. Now or never! Jake shouted. And with that desperate push, they leaped toward the unknown. The moment they jumped, reality twisted around them like a tornado. The ground felt soft and gave way beneath their feet, pulling them into a whirlwind of swirling colors and muffled voices that seemed to scream from the very air itself. Jake's stomach flipped, and for a split second, the world around him blurred. They landed hard, faces down, in a space that smelled of smoke and something pungent. Pushing themselves up, they blinked rapidly, the sudden shift dizzying. As their surroundings came into focus, they found themselves in a vast chamber, walls adorned with slick, iridescent rock. Shimmering patterns lashed against the surface as if the room were alive, breathing in the echoes of their arrival. Jake, what was that? Jess gasped, glancing around, panic flaring in her eyes. I think we're inside the structure. He struggled to regain his bearings, still holding tight to her hand. They could hear the murmur of voices now, not just whispers, but a cacophony of strange sounds that seemed to rise and fall with the pulsing walls. Each beat matched Jake's racing heart, pressing against his ribs as fear clawed at his insides. Do we keep moving? Jake asked, forcing the question between breaths. The looming shadows from the earlier encounter sent shivers through him, and he couldn't shake the primal instinct to run. But something kept him glued to Jess' side. Maybe we can find an exit, she suggested, her voice quaking but resolute. We can't stay here. They pressed forward, cautious steps echoing against the hollow chamber. The floor began to shift, almost like it was responding to their movements. With every cautious step, the surface dulled beneath their feet, dimming the light that thrummed around them. Suddenly, Jess stopped. Wait! Did you hear that? She turned her head in every direction, the lines on her face etched with growing worry. Yeah, Jake murmured, squinting into the darkness beyond their small patch of light. It sounds like crying? A low, keening wail lanced through the chamber, sending vibrations that tingled along their skin. They instinctively huddled closer, peering into the shadows where the sound seemed to be originating. Should we go see? Jess whispered, obviously torn between curiosity and dread. Maybe Jake started, but the decision was snatched from him. A figure emerged from the shadows, a shadowy shape limping toward them. It was tall and gaunt, its features obscured by hanging strands of hair that glimmered like twinkling stars. Little by little, it stepped closer, revealing tear-streaked cheeks and a mouth open in a silent scream. Jess squeezed Jake's hand harder, panic radiating from her. What is that? Her voice shook. The figure paused, eyes locking onto them with an intensity that made Jake's breath hitch. Help me, it whispered, desperation so profound it pulled at every instinct in him. You must choose. Make it stop. Choose what? Jake demanded, heart pounding. What do you mean? A deafening roar echoed from the distant room, causing the glowing walls to crackle like glass. Instinctively, they turned, the feeling of overwhelming dread crashing down like a wave. The creature prowled closer, its shape blending into the shadows, as if it carried the dark itself. Time is running out, the figure pleaded, shifting closer, face twisting with agony. You have to make a choice before it consumes you. Desperation filled the air, and Jake felt his chest tighten. If they didn't act soon, the darkness would swallow them whole. They had to confront their own fears, but would they survive that choice? With the creature's roar vibrating through the chamber once more, Jake's heart raced. What would it be, confronting the unknown and risking everything, or succumbing to the darkness lurking in their own souls? Jake, we have to decide. Jess shouted over the noise, and as the choice loomed over them like a falling meteor, anticipation clawed at his throat. What if we fail? He whispered, searching for answers through the chaos. But before he had a chance to answer, the walls shuddered violently, and they were thrust into confusion once again. What awaited them on the other side of choice? In that terrifying moment, the only certainty was the growing darkness behind them and the chilling question of whether they could fight it, or if it would consume them first. Jake and Jess stood on the precipice, shadows closing in as terror gripped them. The figure with tear-streaked cheeks loomed closer, desperation etched into its features as if it was a lost soul begging for salvation. You must choose, it pleaded, voice quivering like a fragile thread. Choose what? Jake shouted, glancing back at the encroaching darkness, feeling the ground shake beneath them. He was caught between the howl of the creature and the heartrending gaze of the figure. His heart raced, adrenaline flooding his veins. We don't have time for this. Choose to confront your fears or let them consume you. The figure cried, every word a sharp blade. With every second ticking by, the roar of the shadow creature reverberated against the chamber, making the walls shake violently. Jess clutched Jake's arm, eyes wide with a mix of fear and resolve. What if we can change it all? She whispered, her voice barely audible above the chaos. Instantly, Jake felt a flicker of clarity amidst the insanity. They had navigated darkness, faced danger, and here they were, on the brink of another terrible decision. But something deep inside him ignited. We can't let fear dictate our fate, he shouted, making his decision clear. The weight of the moment felt like a punch to the gut, but he couldn't hold back anymore. We choose to confront whatever waits for us, Jess affirmed, echoing his defiance with passion. The figure nodded, understanding flaring in its eyes. Then stand together. Face what lingers within, and the darkness will retreat. Embrace the power you harbor inside. Look fear in the eye. The ground trembled again, the walls flickering like dying stars, but they held on to each other, hands clasped in unity. The shadows writhed, swirling around them like a tempest, but Jake and Jess focused on the fiery energy charging within their hearts. Together, they shouted in unison, voices strong against the roaring storm. Suddenly, time stopped. The chaos faded, all sound drowned out by an oppressive silence that hung thick in the air. Jake felt a surge of strength, warmth radiating between them as if their very souls aligned, a connection forged through trials and tribulations. Before them materialized images, echoes of their past fears. They faced moments that had haunted them: Jake's insecurities about being a single dad, his struggles to balance joy and sorrow, and Jess's fight against the judgment that came with her youth. Each fear knotted within them, yet with each heartbeat, power grew to dispel it. "Let go!" Jess shouted, and Jake felt the weight of burdens begin to lift. They both closed their eyes, envisioning the fears dissipating like mist. As they did, the creature's roar grew distant, shadows receding into smaller wisps. Light poured into the chamber, filling every corner, and with it came peace, washing over them like a warm tide. When they opened their eyes, they stood standing on a gorgeous beach, waves gently lapping at the shore. The relentless creature had vanished, banished by the strength of their combined will. The sun shone brightly overhead, and the soft, golden sand embraced their feet. "What just happened?" Jess whispered in awe, heart still racing. Jake glanced at her, eyes glimmering with a mix of disbelief and exhilaration. "We did it. We found strength in each other. We faced our fears." Jess smiled, a spark of joy lighting up her face. "I think we can tackle anything now." They shared a fleeting moment in understanding that they were no longer shackled by the past. United in courage, they forged ahead, walking along the shore, leaving the remnants of their fears behind. As the day began to fade, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Jake felt his heart swell with possibilities. He realized this was not just about survival. It was about embracing life, loving fiercely, and opening the door to future adventures. "Whatever happens next, we'll face it together," he said, glancing at Jess, her laughter ringing through the air. Life felt renewed, vibrant, and everything sparkled with potential. "Together," she echoed, eyes shining bright with purpose and hope. They reached the horizon, hand in hand, ready for whatever awaited them beyond the sunset. This moment was just the beginning. Don't you want to keep the adventure going? You need to subscribe now to our channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to fuel the algorithm and help us get our tales out. Flood the comments section with your thoughts, reactions, and theories about this journey. And don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support means the world.